freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. When I'm down, there'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. They'll be singing. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound.
Come and go with me. Come and go with me to that place in your heart where love casts out fear and courage is rooted in kindness. Come and go with me to that place in your mind where compassionate curiosity leads to understanding and care. Come and go with me to that place in your spirit where the walls fall away and beloved community is made possible. Come, let us travel together in this hour as we begin our time of worship. I'm the Reverend Julia Hamilton, and I am delighted to have you here at the Unitarian Society of Santa Barbara this morning. I'm delighted to have you singing here in the room with us in this physical sanctuary. I'm delighted to have you singing along at home in our Zoom sanctuary, one congregation in many places, one community striving to live with integrity, nurture wonder, and inspire the actions that transform us and transform the world. And I am especially delighted to be here together with all of you who have made it here on the Sunday morning after our big auction celebration and party last night. It was a wonderful evening for all of those of you who are here, but the fun is not over. For those of you who couldn't make it last night, we will be having our after-auction opportunities coming up. So if you want to still have a chance to get in on some of the fun that happens throughout the year, keep an eye out over the next couple of weeks for an opportunity to join in online, in person in the garden. You'll see a big inflatable shark floating around because it was a surf and safari theme. And I have some wonderful first hot off the presses news to share, which is that as of right now, we have raised over $31,000, which is fantastic. It is a fantastic way towards our goal of $35,000, which was a little bit up from where we've been in years past. And not just the funds that were raised to support this congregation, but the fun that was had with all of the live music, the fantastic food, the good company, new faces and friends that you all brought in to share the experience. It was a lovely evening, and it would not have been possible without many, many hands lending in. So if you helped out in the auction in advance of last night in any way, you want to just raise your hand? Let's give all of our auction volunteers a round of applause. It is a labor of love, and I heard from some folks who are volunteering that it's a pretty good time too. So if you're thinking about ways to help out, keep an eye next year, next fall. We are going to be looking for our auction elves again to jump into the fun. And I would be remiss if I didn't name one person who helps make it all happen, and that is Erin Wilson, our Director of Administration. You may not see Erin very often on Sunday mornings, but she is here all week long helping this place run and be the vibrant community that we know and love. So if you see Erin, give her some appreciations for all of the hard work and some late nights that went into making the auction happen. We have a lot going on here in the life of this congregation, so if you are joining us, if you're a newcomer or a visitor or a friend or family member, we would love to get connected and help you get to know us. So stop by our welcome table in the courtyard after services, sign our connection card online or drop it into the offertory when it comes around. Ask any questions that you like. We have a newcomer orientation on the second Sunday of every month in the front office, and we have what we call our Path to Membership class coming up next week. It's a Tuesday and Wednesday evening. We're trying a little bit of a new hour, 1 hour Tuesday, 1 hour Wednesday. And it's an opportunity to learn more about this congregation, meet some other new folks, have a chance to chat with me a little bit about Unitarian Universalist history, which I like to nerd out on with you. And if you think that this congregation just might be your home, your community, come and join us on Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. And you can talk to Angie, our outreach and membership coordinator, to sign up for that. I'd like to invite you all now to take a breath, to allow yourself to arrive this morning into this shared space. And as we ring our bell, let the sound connect us. And now I'd like to invite Rory Moore to come forward with our words for chalice lighting this morning. If you're joining us at home online, if you'd like to kindle a flame or type into the chat, chalice is lit so we can see those sparks coming up all over our community.
Our chalice lighting words this morning are words from Pat Uribe Lichty. We come from many places, along different paths, bringing different truths. We come with different histories and different realities, and yet we come together as one people, with faith that we can use our differences to heal ourselves and each other, to bring wholeness to a fractured world. May the light of our chalice remind us that we are a people taught by different stories, with many voices, but always one people, working in a world where love creates justice and justice gives birth to peace.
Every week we take a moment to think about something good we've seen in the world to help us hold on to that vision of love and justice that we want to make more real each and every passing week. So I invite you to take a moment this morning now, or maybe at coffee hour at home. You can type it into the chat if you want. Something you've seen that has brought you hope and joy, even amidst all of the challenges we find. And I have some wonderful news to share for our collective good thing this morning. It's a morning of good news, because I wanted to let you know that as part of our capital campaign that we're working towards, we have this idea of building resilience emerging as one of the core goals of the campaign. And to kick us off on this building resilience piece of the campaign, the Unitarian Society has been awarded a rather substantial grant to do a full energy audit of our campus, our systems, and our practices, and to become what's called a resiliency hub, working with the city and the county to build a community network of resilience that's not just us, but us interconnected with our larger and wider community. This is a fantastic way to launch us off in the right direction as we determine which projects we're going to include in our capital campaign this coming year. And it really does show that we are not just working for ourselves, but for our place in that network of helpers in which we live, so that we can be a place where people turn to in times of crisis, that can keep the lights on, stay safe, and provide shelter for those who need it most. We have a long history of doing that, and this is one more step we are taking to become a more resilient world, and that's our good thing for this morning. Yeah. So in that spirit of connection, we're going to try this one more time. We're going to try this, on Sundays fairly regular. We're going to try greeting each other as a community. Now, last time I did this, for those of you who weren't here, you got a little raucous. So I'm going to ask you to think of this as a moment of greeting, not a deep conversation. Save that for coffee hour. Save that for the coffee hour online. But just reach out to one person maybe you don't know. Introduce yourself. Say you're glad they're here. Extend a hand of welcome. And then listen for Heather as she plays the music that will lead us into our next song together. And you can just stay standing. If you're standing up, stay wherever you are as we begin singing. So go ahead and greet each other with just a brief word of welcome.
Join in singing 1020 Woyaya. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know we will. We will get there, heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know we will, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh yeah, yeah, 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 oh yeah, yeah.
Morning, everyone. This is the time in our service when we invite children and anyone who likes to sit on the rug for a story to come forward. Come on up. Julia needs some here. Good morning. I'll wait for everyone to get on up here. So I noticed this morning in my office that there was something in my Wonder Box. And I don't know what it is yet, but I'm wondering, Carver, would you come up and open it and maybe hold it up, whatever's inside. Huh. It's, stand up and hold it up high, yeah. It's a little coffee cup. Huh. You know what that makes me think of? It reminds me, yeah, thanks, Carver. It reminds me of my great-grandmother's kitchen when I was a little kid. When I was maybe about Carver's age, actually, I would get to go to my great-grandmother's kitchen on Sunday afternoons, and I would get to drink a cup of coffee with lots of milk and even more sugar that my grandma would let us have as a treat. I want to tell you a little bit about my great-grandmother. So I was born in Santa Barbara in 1962. You can do the math. My father was born in Santa Barbara in 1940. My grandmother was born in Santa Barbara in 1914. My great-grandmother, Cecilia Gio, was born in Genoa, Italy in 1890. When Cecilia was 16 years old, she immigrated to the United States, that means she moved here, and came to Santa Barbara to marry Salvatore Castagnola. He was a lobsterman, 14 years older than she was. Salvatore had come to the US from Genoa with his brother Battista several years earlier. They bought 2 small boats and started trapping lobsters out near what is now Campus Point in Goleta. They had a little shack out there even. Salvatore and Cecilia had 8 sons: Baptisto, Albert, Victor, Dario, Americo, George, Lawrence, and Italo, and 3 daughters, Mary, Eva, my grandma, and Della. Salvatore and his sons built successful fishing and restaurant businesses in Santa Barbara. Is that first? Yeah, that first picture up there, I'll show it to the kids too. This is my great-grandmother here on the right of the screen when she was still in Italy with her family before she immigrated. My grandmother always said that my great-grandmother, who everyone called Nanny, favored her sons. However, she passed down a strong work ethic and an independent streak to her 3 daughters. She also passed down her ravioli recipe, which my grandmother passed down to her daughter, who passed it down to me. And ever since, my kids and I have struggled to make a decent ravioli at Christmas time. We're not there yet. Nanny died when I was 12. This is a picture of Nanny the way I remember her. When I was a child, I spent many Sunday afternoons in her kitchen with my grandma Eva and her sisters. Even though she had come to the US when she was 16 years old, Nanny never really learned to speak English. As we sat around the table eating cake from Henning's Bakery, a favorite, and drinking that sweet, milky coffee, a treat my grandmother let us kids have, my cousin and I listened to the older women share family gossip, mostly in Italian. When we got bored, we'd go outside and play among the lobster traps outside Nanny's house and pretend we worked in the old fish market next door to the house. Later, I would work in the Castagnola fish markets for a summer. And Nanny's old house was in what is now the funk zone. Some of you may know where that sort of bright green house is, and the yard is a place for Dart Coffee, where you can go and have coffee. That was my great aunt Mary's house, and across the street was where Nanny's house used to be. I've been wondering about Nanny's life as an immigrant. I wonder if she was afraid to leave her family in Genoa and travel on a ship all the way to a new country. I wonder if she really wanted to get married to a man so much older than she was. She was only 16. I wonder how she got by without speaking English. Her husband would be out fishing for long stretches of time. I wonder if she felt lonely or homesick when he was away. As far as I know, she never went back to Italy to visit her family. Once she started having children, 11 of them, I'm sure she was very busy. I wonder if she had any help. I wonder if she made any friends in Santa Barbara. Her sons were successful fishermen, and her family became a part of Santa Barbara's history. I wonder if she ever imagined that she would leave such a legacy in her adopted homeland. And how many of us really know our immigrant family histories? I wish I knew more of mine. And you guys, ask your parents to tell you about where your family comes from and when they came to the United States. Some of us here are more recent immigrants with vivid memories or family stories, but many of us are from families who have been in the US for generations. As new immigrants come to the United States, I wonder what it would look like if Americans really celebrated the rich, varied cultural gifts they bring. Imagine in your mind a tapestry woven with beautiful threads of many colors and textures. I wonder if we could learn to welcome the immigrant with love, not fear. I know we can begin in our own hearts. And that's our time for all ages this morning.
We hold you in our love as you go, as you go. May your heart be at peace as you go, to nurture the spark of your precious love. We hold you in our love as you go.
I invite you now into a time of meditation and reflection and prayer, a time of poetry and words and quiet and then music. I invite you once again to get in touch with your breathing and your body in space wherever you are, wherever you find yourself, however you find yourself. Settle in to this moment. Maybe hold your hands open gently or put your feet on the floor. Pay attention to the breath as it moves in and out of your body, as your heart beats in syncopated rhythm with all of the other hearts held together in this moment. And I'd like to begin with a poem by Donna Markova. I will not die an unlived life. I will not live in fear of falling or catching fire. I choose to inhabit my days, to allow my living to open me, to make me less afraid, more accessible, to loosen my heart until it becomes a wing, a torch, a promise. I choose to risk my significance, to live so that which came to me as seed goes on to the next as blossom, and that which came to me as blossom goes on as fruit. Let us take a moment to loosen our hearts, my friends, bringing into our circle of care all those who are hurting and afraid. Bringing into our circle of care this morning the war-torn places, the unsafe spaces where bombs and bullets are daily news. The devastated places where people are digging out from floods and storms. The fearful places where pain is too often carried in silence, deep within hearts that are broken but still beating. The illnesses that persist. The addictions that challenge and twist us, the estrangements and abandonments and simple human loneliness. There are so many ways we can find our hearts broken in this world. And yet we have gathered to practice compassion in this moment. We are a testament to love that persists, a kindness that can heal, and a strength that rises out of common care. Let us take this moment, this time of quiet, to cultivate that courageous love within us, a love that does not flinch when faced with heartache, but holds a space for all that is and a hope for all that we might become.
May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be whole. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole.
To come forward to share a reflection this morning.
Good morning again. I'm Rory Moore, and perhaps more commonly known as Mimi Bradley's husband. This morning, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I became involved with the Immigrant Legal Defense Center and the first case I handled with the organization. The phone rang, the call came, and when I answered, I heard, "Rory, I've got a case for you, and it's an emergency." Julissa Pena, the executive director of the Santa Barbara's Immigrant Legal Defense Center, was calling, and thus began my active involvement with the ILDC. I've told this story before, once during COVID by Zoom to this group. Some of you may remember. It involves my client Gloria and her son from southern Mexico. She and her 2 children had escaped a violent and mentally abusive husband associated with a drug cartel. She had fled to a large city in Mexico, hundreds of miles away from her rural hometown. There she lived and worked peacefully with her son and daughter for about a year before her husband showed up and forcefully took the daughter, vowing to return for the son and to kill her. Gloria knew she had to leave, and a short time later, she and her son made their way to Tijuana, waited for about a week for their turn to cross the border through the San Isidro port of entry, and immediately sought asylum for herself and her son. After a few days in detention, they were released to join a relative here in Santa Barbara. Then, over the next 15 months, she made periodic court appearances in Los Angeles, all without a lawyer. She missed the 1-year filing deadline for an asylum claim, and the judge told her he had no choice but to order her removal, deportation. At that point, a woman from Drivers Listos, it's an organization that provides rides to immigrants going to court in Los Angeles. A woman from Drivers Listos who had been driving her to court stood up and pleaded for a final continuance, a postponement for 2 weeks to get her paperwork filed. The judge agreed and granted an additional 2 weeks. The driver from Drivers Listos called ILDC, and Julissa Pena called me. That was in late 2018, and that was the emergency. About a year before then, Customs and Border Protection at ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, had started their program of separating children from their parents, detaining them in separate detention facilities. You may recall seeing the news of large numbers of children in warehouse-like cages with indoor fencing. This was deeply offensive to me and motivated me to get involved. At the same time, the fledgling ILDC set about recruiting pro bono lawyers through a series of training seminars presented jointly by the Immigrant Legal Resource Center, a large nationwide immigrant rights organization. At the time, the focus was on helping immigrants with bond hearings so they could pursue their various claims from the street rather than in custody. The success rate increases sharply when a lawyer gets involved. I had hoped to get cases before the immigration court at the ICE facility, the ICE detention facility in Adelanto, out by Victorville. Then Julissa called me with Gloria's emergency and prospective and imminent deportation. Over the next 2 weeks, I met with Gloria and her son. I learned a lot more about the asylum claim and about how to do it, and appeared with her in court in Los Angeles with her paperwork in hand. The Immigrant Legal Defense Center provided me with a mentor, a seasoned immigration lawyer I could call to discuss issues and strategy. And of course, ILDC's Julissa Peña was a constant help. 4 years later, after changes in the judge, many different lawyers for the Department of Homeland Security, rejection of the government's offer to dismiss the case, we finally had a trial on the merits, and her claim was won. Gloria now lives in the Santa Barbara area, and her son is a sophomore at a local high school. This was my first and most involved case. There are others now, and I've been able to work on removal cases, as well as lots of cases involving unaccompanied minors seeking special immigration juvenile status. I'm involved in the litigation of immigrant claims for many reasons. I've been blessed with the privilege of living in Santa Barbara, a supportive family, and material security. And I have skills that I can share. After all, I'm a lawyer, I speak Spanish, and I'm very comfortable in courtrooms. I am appalled at the demonization of immigrants, particularly in the past years, and the long, long waits to have their cases adjudicated and resolved. Further, it is depressing to watch those who appear without lawyers be trampled in immigration courts. The rules are highly particular, detailed, and are not for casual treatment. I am grateful to be able to contribute as I also learn. As you know, the Immigrant Legal Defense Center is a special partner with our collection plate this month. I urge you to give generously to the ILDC and consider what special skills you may have to contribute to the presentation of evidence needed for a successful immigration application or defense from removal. Are you a doctor who can assist in explaining medical issues? A psychologist who might prepare an evaluation documenting past trauma? An accountant who could help an immigrant document payment of taxes? Do you have specialized knowledge about certain countries and conditions? Perhaps you are someone with occasional time to drive an immigrant to court in Los Angeles. Van Nuys and Los Angeles are the immigration courts that serve the Santa Barbara area. We all have something to contribute to others in our broader community. Please, answer the call. Thank you.
Thank you, Rory, and thank you all of you who lend your time and skills to make this world a better place where all can thrive. It is truly remarkable what we can accomplish together. Please read with me the affirmation of gratitude and giving that is in your order of service. Let us be grateful when we are able to give, for many do not have that privilege. Let us be grateful for those who share their gifts with us, for we are enriched by their giving. And let us be grateful even for our needs, so that we may learn from the generosity of others. Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, singers. I think that's a song we're going to have to sing more than once. This congregation has such an amazing history of showing up for immigration justice over the years. It's not just a recent thing. This is something that is embedded in the culture of this community. It's a thread that runs through the heart of the Unitarian Society that pulls us towards this awareness of interdependence that crosses all borders. It's this thread that is spun out of compassion, that recognizes the human impulse to find safety and well-being, to resist fear, even if it means leaving everything you know to start over in a new place. I know this issue has been alive. I have heard stories about how this congregation was part of the sanctuary movement in the 1980s, hosting a family from El Salvador over in Blake Lounge for a while. And so I wanted to do a little brainstorming this morning just to kind of lift up some of what this congregation has done over the years, over the past 10 or 12 years since I've been a part of this community. What are some of the ways that you remember we have shown up and partnered with others in this work? What are some things we've done? Go ahead. What about that concert we held right when the ILDC was getting off the ground? We held a big, fabulous, took a lot of work concert to help raise funds for the Immigrant Legal Defense Center as it was forming. What else have we done? Trips to the border, right? We've had groups going to the La Cobina migrant shelter in Mexicali, bringing art supplies and food and making connections that have resulted in some long-standing work. What else? What came out of that? I'm looking over at Deb and Anna because I know they know. Sponsoring our family, Christina and Luz and Sophia, we connected with that family in the migrant shelter as they were fleeing anti-LGBTQ violence in their home. They came to California, and we have companioned that family through really hard times and have made a remarkable difference in their lives and in our lives in the process. What else have we done? What else have you seen here? Protests, right? So when Rory mentioned that time when kids were being separated from the families and we saw those horrific images, I remember going down with members of this congregation to the base where they were being held to protest that family separation policy. And many, many times over the years, we have shown up in the streets with our voices and our hearts to advocate for a more humane immigration system. We have held workshops on Know Your Rights here in Parish Hall in partnership with the Mexican Consulate from time to time. It's something that happened midweek that you might not know about or see, but this campus becomes a place where people can come and feel safe and welcomed and seen, and we can provide resources because we have this community space to share. We have worked with dreamers at UCSB, people who are pursuing DACA because they were brought here as children and want to find a way to stay in the only home they've ever known. We have worked with migrant farm workers during the Thomas Fire through the Immigrant Sanctuary Alliance. We have provided food and space during mudslides and pandemics and worked in partnership with our community in all kinds of ways. And these things have happened no matter what administration was in the White House. These things have happened whether Democrats or Republicans have been in power, because the issue of immigration justice is one that does not begin and end with any one political party. However, right now, in this season in this country, it feels like there's this rise in hateful anti-immigrant rhetoric that has been increasing week by week as we head towards this election season. And I don't need to tell you all of the horrible things that have been said. A quick scan of the news will tell you everything about the false accusations about the Haitian immigrant community in Springfield, Ohio. Every day, the language at right-wing political rallies invokes white supremacist ideology of good genes and bad blood. This rhetoric has already resulted in bomb threats against schools and government buildings and people's homes. Just yesterday, CNN ran a fact-checking article reviewing the current right-wing rhetoric around immigration and identified 28 distinct false claims made just over the past 2 weeks. And language seems to be getting more vitriolic and violent day by day. And it has expanded, not just to target undocumented immigrants, but all immigrants now, all immigrants, including people who are here legally. There is no longer this distinction being made between undocumented workers and visa holders, refugees and DACA students. Everyone who does not fit into this nationalist fantasy of the American ideal is subject to this violent rhetoric and threats of removal. And so I am so grateful that we do not come fresh to this work, that we are not starting this work today. We do not have to build our response in isolation and from scratch. We have built this network of trusted partnerships that can hold us, work with us, and empower us to continue moving forward. So it's because of this network of trusted partnerships that I found myself, right? One of the first things I did when I got back from my sabbatical about a month ago, I found myself driving up to Santa Maria to participate in a convening of immigrant advocates from the Central Coast. And we were being called together by the California Immigrant Policy Center to work on scenario planning, to think about what kind of work might need to be done under different election outcomes. They're working all over the state with on-the-ground local networks in each region. And I want to give a shout out to the Central Coast. They said that their 2 meetings in the Central Coast in Ventura and Santa Maria were some of the best attended meetings that they had had so far, beating out the folks in LA by a long shot. So we are doing really good connected work here on the Central Coast. Because this was a strategy session and there were sensitive conversations being had, it was an invitation-only event, inviting partners who were already enmeshed in the process. And so I want to show you a photo of the folks who were gathered up in Santa Maria that day. It was serious, it was thoughtful, it was smart, and it was also joyful, and good to be in the company of people who are doing this work. So as part of the workshop, we were asked to imagine ourselves in several possible futures, to map out the relationships and resources we thought we might need, no matter what various election outcomes we theorized. And I have to say, it was a little tough, right, to go there, to go into those various scenarios that I'm sure many of us wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning doing anyways, to confront our fears about where this nation might be headed, to do our best to be ready for the worst, as it were. But on the flip side, we were also called to remember that no matter who is in the White House, there will be work to be done. And so after meeting in our small table groups, we rejoined all together in one big group to share up what themes had emerged. And the main word that seemed to rise up over and over again was fear. We are in a fearful moment. And fear is being used to divide, exploit, and intimidate, and marginalize. And it's also being used to motivate, and activate, and indoctrinate, and yes, to fundraise too. It turns out that fear can be quite useful for raising money. But fear is not just one thing. Because I arrived at the meeting expecting to hear about how fear is being used to divide us. That's not a secret. Casting immigrants as the root of every problem and an existential danger to the quote-unquote real America that the nationalist wing is trying to empower. I expected to hear conversations about the fear-mongering of politicians and malicious lies that are being spread. But fear cropped up in another place too. The fear that was spreading within our communities themselves. The awareness of constantly being targeted and scapegoated and demeaned every day. What that did to people's hearts and spirits. That every time someone turned on the TV or read the news or scrolled through their social media, they heard language being used to describe themselves and their families as unwanted at best, and criminally dangerous and less than human at worst. So one of the main areas of concern that rose up was how to keep this internalized fear from being weaponized, from being used against them, because of course fear keeps people silent and makes them vulnerable to increased exploitation. And those fears about being exploited and targeted, they're not imaginary. When thousands of people at a political rally hold up professionally printed, prepared signs that read, "Mass deportation now." When the military is being threatened to be used to go door to door in raids that will tear apart families, this threat is neither subtle nor exaggerated. This language is designed to stoke fear, create an existential fear among nationalist supporters, as well as terror and fear within the targeted immigrant population. Use of the words like poisoning the blood, infiltration, and the enemy within. This language has a lineage. It does not come from nowhere. Historian Anne Applebaum chronicles how the fascist regimes of the 20th century used that same language. Stalin and Hitler and Mussolini and Pol Pot, they all relied on xenophobia, fear of the immigrant, as one of the core bases of their power. And I do not throw these names around lightly. But the first thing on the to-do list of the ultra-nationalist right is a promise to deport, and this is what has been said, 15 to 20 million people. That is 3 to 5% of the population of the United States. You can imagine the kind of mobilization and terror that an initiative like that raises. Now, none of this is news. But the question is, what do we do? What do we do with this appeal to fear that we are confronted with? Aside from writing get out the vote postcards until our fingers cramp, what can we do? Is there any possible way to turn this tide? And the good news that I want to share with you is that there is. There are ways that we can start to shift the pendulum swinging back towards a more compassionate world. And we provide concrete services and mutual aid and support in the meantime, crisis response in the meantime. But we cannot forget about the longer strategic work of culture shift. It is notoriously difficult to change someone's mind when bigotry and prejudice are on the table. In-group and out-group attitudes become deeply ingrained in our identity, and sociologists have been studying this forever, and it is very, very difficult to persuade someone to move out of a biased position. But difficult is not the same thing as impossible. And so through the work of the California Immigrant Policy Center, I learned about this concept called deep canvassing. Because I've been looking, right? I have, like many of you, been searching to figure out what do we do beyond just mobilizing people who are already on our side. And there's this new organizing practice called deep canvassing. The California Immigrant Policy Center is deeply invested in this. Now, how many of you have been canvassing door to door for a political campaign? Right, quite a handful, quite a few of you. If you haven't done it before, it is a fantastic experience. I've done it a handful of times myself. It's scary to walk up to a stranger's door and knock and say hello, but it's possible. And I encourage you to try it. And in traditional canvassing, usually you have your list and you've got information. Maybe you have flyers and you've got information about candidates and issues and why people should support the cause and data to back up your positions and policy statements. And the trouble is, statistics don't do much to get people to change. They're great for mobilizing people who are already on board, which is no small thing. Don't get me wrong, we have to do that. But banging someone over the head with statistics does not shift their heart. Deep canvassing uses a different model, and they've been doing sociological studies with it to show its effectiveness, to move beyond just anecdotal stories. But what it means is that deep canvassing doesn't rely on information, but rather the establishment of a basic human connection and the sharing of stories, both by the person canvassing and the person answering the door. One of the canvassers in one of the first studies in 2018, Vivian, who is a non-binary person going door to door in support of LGBTQ rights in Massachusetts, called it giving grace. Giving grace to the person who is standing in front of you and asking them to share their story. A conversation designed around compassion and connection, not information. It's described as this practice of cultivating curiosity and patience, inviting people to reflect on their own lives, listening deeply to what they have to say, and only then drawing connections at an emotional level to the issues at hand, rather than using data to prove a point. If it sounds a little like therapy, it uses some of the same basic principles of human psychology. And maybe it sounds a little bit like our connection circles here at the Unitarian Society, right? This practice of deep listening, of asking people to reflect on their own lives, to connect across the similarities and differences of our lives as they are shared. And we say here all the time that that's where transformation, where change happens, in these moments of listening deeply to each other. So reading this description of deep canvassing, it was like, duh, this is what we've been doing here for so long. It's time to start taking that out into the world. And the thing is, it works. Because we know that when someone is feeling defensive and angry and fearful, they are not open to change. In fact, they might double down on their position. But when a person feels seen and heard and genuinely cared for, or what I might say, loved, surprise, they're more likely to be able to connect across differences. Asking a question like, when was a time when someone showed you compassion when you really needed it? Opens the door to a life story, time to listen, and then maybe share a little bit about how other people in their community are looking for compassion in a time of need. And CIPC ran a study in 3 cities around the country, including here in Orange County, where they sent out a team of canvassers to compare different canvassing techniques. One team doing kind of a nothing placebo, one team doing traditional canvassing, and one team trained in deep canvassing approaches. And they went back and talked to the households 1 week later and 1 month later and then several months later. And the only approach that provided durable change in people's positions was the deep canvassing approach. And it's not overwhelming. It's 4-5 percentage points. There are still doors that get slammed in people's faces. There are still people who don't want to hear it. But in these times with the divisions that are happening right now, 4 or 5 percentage points is huge. We don't have to move everyone to move the pendulum back towards a more compassionate trajectory. We just have to be willing to put the effort in to move the people who can be moved with compassion and love and care. This is not the only tool we need in our toolbox, but it is one of them. It matters that our work is not to just dismantle the fear-based ideology we hear about, but to provide an alternative experience to people, an experience of being heard and seen, an experience of how the conversation can be different, trusting that compassion can also take root just as fear can. It's this leap of faith, my friends, trusting that love can move people in an unkind world. It's hard not to be cynical these days. But it turns out that loving your neighbor is not just a moral and ethical stance. It is a statistically significant strategic one as well. Perhaps there's some wisdom in what can be found in thousands of years of religious teachings that ask us to put love at the center of what we do. Perhaps it won't reach everyone, but it might reach enough people that the tide will turn. We are aiming, after all, for beloved community, not just political power. We're hoping for a better world for our children, not just a momentary win for ourselves. And we have to recommit over and over again to the path that will get us there. loving our neighbors, reaching out with compassion to those who are hurting, cultivating patience and courage in the face of fear and urgency, and becoming resilient enough to show up with an open heart even when we ourselves are afraid. Let us show up. Let us cultivate love. And let us resist fear with open hearts. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. Singing helps too, so let us sing again, and we're going to sing number 126, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing. Please rise in body and spirit. It's in the gray hymnal, and we also have the words on the screen.
Come thou fount of every blessing, tune our hearts to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. While the hope of life's perfection fills our hearts with joy and love, teach us ever to be faithful. May we still thy goodness prove. Come thou fount of every vision, lift our eyes to what may come. See the lion and the young lamb dwell together in thy home. Hear the cries of war fall silent, feel our love glow like the sun. Teachers will serve one another, then our heaven is begun. Come thou fount of inspiration, turn our lives to higher waves. Lift our gloom and desperation, show the promise of this day. Help us bind ourselves in union, help our hands tell of our love. With thine aid, O fount of justice, earth be fair as heaven above.
Stay right where you are, and if you want to hold your hands open or put them over your heart, or if you have permission, if you want to hold hands with someone nearby, that's fine too. And as you go out into this beautiful and heartbreaking world, may the light of love shine upon you, out from within you, be gracious unto you, and bring you peace. For this is the day we are given. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Let us call out a blessing.
Call out a blessing, 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 call